This is Authentic Talks, where we ask the hard questions and challenge the status quo in cybersecurity and identity. We bring you real conversations with leaders who believe authenticity is the key to trust and transformation.
Welcome back to Authentic Talks. Episode 4 is officially in session. And today's episode is a special one because it's for the woman who build, secure, architect, and keep identity program alive every single day. And even when they're the only woman in the room, and I think that my guest, you've experienced that. Maybe we'll talk about this later. So I'm sorry to disappoint the audience today. There is no Rich. Rich is busy today. So instead, we are going to hear strong voices, real stories of two incredible women that are helping shape the future of identity and security. So grab your coffee, your confidence, or whatever fuel your brilliance, and let's get into it. I'll set a little bit of context before you jump right in. Every time we start this podcast, we talk about AI, we talk about the tide of technologies that are washing us and that are reshaping everything that we touch. And there is one thing that is anchoring us, and this is trust. And today I want to shine light on the perspective and expertise of two women that are right at the heart of these tides. They're helping shaping, steering, and redefining what trust looks like in a converged physical and digital world. So join me today and welcome Natacha Torres for HID. Hello, Natacha. How are you today?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. And then we have, I think on the other side of the ocean, we have Elizabeth Garber. How are you today, Elizabeth?
Very good, thank you. Yes, I am on the other side of the ocean, and it is very snowy here.
Well, I think that we share that. In Sweden, it's been snowing all day, so I think we send that to you. So let's jump right in, and I'd like to take a few moments. If you could both introduce yourself, maybe we can start with Natacha. Give us a little bit introduction about yourself so the people know who you are.
Yeah, of course. So as you said, I work at HID. I work within the physical access control solutions business as sort of the lead of marketing for Europe, Asia Pacific, and our Oceania regions. So I think I'm fairly new to the security industry. I joined HID 3 years ago, and prior to that, I spent a lot of time sort of working in IT and tech.
Fantastic, and looking forward to hear more about your path and how you evolved in this industry. Elizabeth, you are, should I say, veteran in this industry, or is it a loaded word?
I think it depends how you define veteran. I usually tell my career story in 3 parts, and so if you give me credit for part 1, you can call me a veteran. So part 1 is I worked in a number of different industries as a digital transformation specialist, I suppose. I could brand myself that way. So I did that for a very long time. I worked in financial services and telecommunications. I worked in geospatial data for a while, and it was all about delivering technological change for the benefit of customers. When I found my way into identity and access management specifically towards the end of that phase 1, I was working in financial services, and then I dove headfirst into this industry, and I haven't really looked back since. And I would say that's about 5 years ago. And if that's where you define the beginning, I don't know if 5 years really qualifies you as a veteran, but I've been in this industry since then, and I have been first, I had an identity startup that was really working across the digital identity space with financial institutions. And then what I found was where my passion really lies is in working with the nonprofits in the industry. So that is what I do exclusively now. I work with the identity nonprofits that are building standards or building capabilities in the industry. So my main clients are the OpenID Foundation, ID Pro. I work with Women in Identity, and then the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation. So all of those latter three are working to build a more inclusive pipeline of talent, and they do that in different ways. And I'm sure we can dive into what each of those organizations does. But that's what I'm doing now. So I don't know. Am I a veteran?
Well, you could qualify. You passed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll definitely dive into that because I think it's super interesting. We have a little bit of a habit here in this podcast with Rich, and usually it's Rich who's doing that. So this time I get to do it. So we have what we call the authentic moment, where we ask you the authentic question. And I have one special for you, for both of you. The first one is really dedicated. We are in this Women History Month, which is usually in March. And I'd like to ask you this bold question. What truth needs to be said out loud today about identity? Let's bring it there. But if you want to go beyond, let's do that. Natacha, do you have an idea?
I think it's all about representation. So, the security space is really complex. It's not defined by a single viewpoint. And I think having lots of people around the table to discuss different perspectives is critical in making sure that our industry is much safer, much more secure for our customers, the people who work within the industry. So I think, having representation, whether that's gender diversity, just people from different backgrounds, is kind of really critical to our success, our collective success.
Elizabeth, is there something that you'd like to add to that?
Sure. I mean, identity, technology in general, and identity technology specifically is inherently political in nature. I think that is what I would like us, that's the truth that I think needs to be said, that when we're making these decisions about technology in general and identity in particular, we're making decisions about who has access, who has permissions, who has rights, who's excluded, who is not. And that's one of the reasons why representation matters so very much, because every time you're making one of those decisions, you're weighing values, you're making trade-offs. And that ultimately is going to have an impact on access, accessibility, inclusion, and the manifestation of rights.
That's very true. And before we get into this conversation, which is an important conversation, I'd like to go a little bit into the origin stories, or your different origin stories, and where did you start? How did you end up in HID or working for OpenID or ID Pro in those companies? What was this a deliberate decision to go into this area, or is it something that actually you arrived there like naturally as a flow? And did you first feel this was your space where you would thrive, or was it not? Natacha, do you want to start?
Yeah. So, as I said, I started my career sort of working in the IT and the tech space. I worked with sort of system integrators and installers, and then I moved more agency side. So obviously I've got a marketing background, so I was working in a marketing agency, acting as like an extension of teams for large corporate organizations. So household names, Microsoft, Dell, Google, etc. So I did that for a number of years, working on different types of projects, campaigns, programs, spanning from brand and web to sort of driving leads and driving awareness. And I mean, it gave me great experience, great exposure to different types of technologies and solutions that they were obviously driving. And I kind of stumbled into HID. I was kind of looking for new roles. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to leave agency after doing it for a number of years. And whilst I'd had some exposure to security, it was much more on the cyber security side. So physical security was a whole new realm to me. And I certainly when we talk about access control or identity management, I had very little understanding around the complexity that goes into it, because often as a user of entering a building, it is the badge, it's a reader, it's the door, it's a very hopefully a seamless and straightforward experience. So it's been a big learning curve. It's been a really exciting learning curve. I think the security industry inherently, it's meant to be, it's meant to be uneventful in terms of, usually when people are calling you, there's a problem, and we are trying to avoid problems. We're trying to keep people and places safe. But actually, when you dig deeper and when you're involved in the development of technologies and sort of working with different organizations around standards, it's actually, there's so much to it. There's so much complexity to it. It's a really exciting space. So as I said, I joined about 3 years ago. There's been a lot to absorb, and I'm still learning a lot about the industry as well. But it's been an exciting journey to date.
And just a quick follow-up on that, do you have a view on where you see the industry evolving? What do you see in the market currently, and in physical access, in digital access, and in general?
I mean, a big theme at the moment is kind of the convergence of physical and digital access. And I think that's just over time we're just going to see more of that. So access is so much more than just sort of accessing your door, and especially with the technology that underpins so many systems. These are all kind of data points, attack points, areas of risk that as a business and our customers also need to think about. So how can we make sure that we're integrating into some of those ecosystems, into that IT stack, and delivering obviously systems and solutions that are really robust and protect the people, the data, and those businesses, our customers.
Great. And did you see, because we are all women in this room, and the purpose is to cast a light on not necessarily on gender, because this is not the purpose, but did you see a different way, or do you approach it differently, you think? Or is this just a common approach on how to manage identity? Do you think that women are bringing or approaching IAM differently?
Yeah, I think we do bring a different perspective to these things. I think it's sometimes difficult to give tangible examples, but I would say from my point of view, I'm not a highly technical person, and I'm not saying many women are, right? But from my point of view, I often go into the room and I will admit that I'm not highly technical, and I kind of try bring stuff back to basics, because I think sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in the detail and become too technical for the audience that we're speaking to. They're not always, especially when we're speaking to security directors or security managers, whilst they understand access control, they're not necessarily specialists in access control themselves. And so I think sometimes just going in with that different perspective is, oh, hang on, let's take a step back. What is actually the core message that we're trying to communicate helps just clarify, how we want to talk to our customers and how we want to talk to the market around sort of key topics and key themes.
So you help reframe and focus on the problem at hand, and also the user experience in the end. Okay.
Yeah, I try to sometimes bring it back to basics, and try to simplify what we're trying to articulate.
Being practical. If you're a mom, you know what I'm talking about, right? Joke aside, if I am going to turn towards you, Elizabeth, and I'd like you started to tell us about your journey, especially with nonprofit organizations. You've named Women in Identity, ID Pro. Is it possible for you to just give us a brief overview on all the nonprofits that you're working with and why it matters? What is the work that you're doing, and what's the value that they bring to the business? So if we start, for example, with Women in Identity.
Sure. I'll run through all the nonprofits that I either currently or recently have worked with, because all of them are worth knowing about. And yes, we can start with Women in Identity, especially being that this is our International Women's Day episode. So Women in Identity is really working to create a more inclusive identity industry. And they're talking about that both from the perspective of the industry itself and women's participation and representation in it, but also the products that we build. And the bet here is that a more inclusive industry is going to net out with more inclusive products that are more representative of society as a whole and create more financial and social inclusion as an end result. So that's really what Women in Identity is doing. ID Pro is another organization that is kind of looking at the industry as a whole and trying to build capacity. So ID Pro is there trying to ensure that practitioners have a network and a set of vendor neutral resources that can be drawn upon as they go out and solve problems and face up to an emerging threat landscape and an evolving set of challenges and threats out there. So we offer a community, we offer a body of knowledge, we offer the CID Pro exam, which is a certification that you can do to say, yes, I am a certified identity practitioner. So that's the ID Pro. And then the last one on the capacity and the industry talent perspective is the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation. This is a relatively new organization, and it offers what you may have heard of as the Kim Cameron Award and the Vittorio Bertucci Award. So they are offering scholarships for people who are either new to the industry or who are like independent practitioners working on standards development. They're offering them opportunities to travel to industry conferences, meet new mentors, create new collaborations, and just deepen their exposure, their networks, their knowledge, etc. So that's a really great organization that I'm proud to be a part of as well. I'll stop there because that's the capacity side. And then I've also got the standards and interoperability side of the nonprofit world that I work with. But did you want to dig into any of that?
I think we can start with those three. And the first question that came while we were talking is what's your evaluation? Like, what are the things that you hear from in Women in Identity that are the women that are coming in there and then trying to build their career, build knowledge? learn, and especially in IT Pro, are these trends that you're seeing, like more or less women, or difficulties that are and topics that are recurring?
I would say it's no different from women in tech generally, which is, so this isn't my first time running a women's network in technology. I, I ran a network on the south coast of the UK for a long time, as part of Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In back when it was kind of relatively new. That was really, I actually had dinner in her house once as a result of that, which is an interesting anecdote. But I would say that, across the board, women in tech do feel like there is still value in connecting with one another, right? With talking about the obstacles and the challenges of advancement in a world where you really are often one of very few in the room. It is still something that we contend with. Back when I joined this industry for the diving into the rabbit hole, I was joining it was during COVID time, so I was joining weekly Zooms where I really was the only female face, and I was new to the industry as well, and I didn't think there were any others around, and I think women really do experience that, especially also in the standards world, which is also where I really started in this industry. There are often very, very few female members of standards working groups. And the cultures do build up in those spaces. Cultures build up in any space that humans are operating in. And it can feel odd to, show up and be one of very few. And it doesn't necessarily speak to any innate differences or any negative behaviors on the part of men, but it is still a thing that needs to be navigated. And by and large, the biggest theme I would say is women do still find value in talking about some of those challenges.
And I'd like to stop a little bit here on the requirements, or how you build the standards, and how your voice as a woman is important in building the standards. So do you feel that, not do you feel, but how do you, what are the things that you actively do when building the standards to bring this the perspective and this representation of women in the way we build standards?
Well, let me pause here for a second. So I think it's not necessarily about bringing the speaking for all of women, or bringing so no one woman can show up to a working group and say, hey, I'm here to speak for women. What they're doing is showing up and speaking with their expertise and the unique skills that they bring to the table, right? It is really important that we have representation in those rooms. I think, and I'm not just speaking from a gender perspective here. One of the most notable differences that I see in communities like that is that there's often not a lot of representation from, and I don't love this term, but it's used, and I don't have a better one yet, but global South countries, for example. I think we need to work as standards bodies and as standards groups to bring in more voices from South America, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from other parts of the world, so that we can be actually looking at use cases that matter. That, having women at the table can help ensure that we are thinking of use cases beyond what, a group that does not include women includes. But the more diverse perspectives we can bring into those communities, the better our solutions are going to apply globally. And that's what standards are meant to do. They're meant to ensure interoperability globally.
So that was a great answer. As we evolving, there are a lot of questions that are coming in as well. And you were talking about the way you work, both of you, how you evolved in your careers. Natasha, you explain as well sometimes how vulnerability, how you you showed vulnerability in expressing that you were not an expert, a technical expert, and that was okay because the value that you were bringing was on a different scale. I'd like to talk about a little bit about the people who opened the doors for you in this industry. Is there an anecdote that you'd like to share with us? Who's the person that really was a great support of you, was really supporting for you, really opened the door for you? And how would you like to keep it open for the next generation to come? Who wants to start?
I can start. I have somebody who came to mind immediately. His name is Don Tebow, and he's one of the founders actually of the Kim Cameron Award, and he was the executive director of the OpenID Foundation. Very early on, while I was still working in the bank that I worked at previously, I had already jumped straight into the rabbit hole, and what I ended up doing was volunteering for my sins to pull together a white paper that was written by about 150 people ultimately. So it started out as this like mangled piece of brilliance, but with 150 people, all of whom speak different languages. It was a career challenge to pull it together into a coherent, finished product with several incredible co-editors who are also mentors and who I would also credit with opening the door to many opportunities for me in the industry. So their names are Mark Hain, Nat Sakamura, Valentin Nombloch, and I've never been able to pronounce this man's name properly, Dawe Liklama, I believe, but he will, if he hears this, probably continue laughing at my inability to say his name. But at the end of that product, I was kind of deciding, how am I going to stick around in this industry? I kind of have to continue doing my day job at the bank, or I can find a way to continue doing this thing that I'm really, really passionate about now, because after having done all that work, all that research, beginning to understand the role that identity systems and identity architectures play, not just in the financial services industry where I worked, but in actually creating opportunities for people to realize their fundamental human rights and, participate equally in a global economy. Like, I was really into that at that point. I had to figure out, how am I going to do this as my day job? And this guy, Don Tebow, he just said to me, why don't you send a note to the co-chairs of this working group at the OpenID Foundation and tell them that you're gonna co-chair it with them, and that these are the reasons why you're gonna co-chair it with them. And I did, and they let me. And so he got me to volunteer again after volunteering. So I just continued to take volunteer opportunities to get closer and closer to what I wanted to be doing until I was able to actually turn it into my career. And I will always thank Don for being a mentor and taking advantage of my willingness to volunteer for things.
Well, I think that's a great story. I think this is, it's a great story because it shows perseverance. It shows also the ability to being bold and to trust your capacity. So that's fantastic. And Natacha, I think I'd like to turn around in your direction and ask you the same question. I know you showed us in the previous conversations that this was not, you've been doing marketing before, so who opened the door and allowed you to grow to where you are currently now? Because you're a little bit modest here. You've been SCI award, you had an SCI award, so you've been recognized as well by your community.
Yeah, and that was an incredible honor a few years ago. It wasn't long after I joined HID either. And I'm really fortunate that I've had so many wonderful mentors and people who've championed me throughout my career. Navigating and finding opportunities and identifying some of the things that you do want to do, but also those things that you don't want to do. It's always a bit of a roller coaster ride. But I would say that within HID, one of the things that really stuck with me was, I think I was about eight months into role, so obviously new to the industry, but I do have a strong marketing background, and I was given a challenge, something to tackle. The team were really looking to kind of unlock a program. They'd asked me to spend some time sort of researching and develop a strategy in terms of how best to approach it. So right up my street, something I could really get into, and I did my due diligence. I did my work. I developed this, what I thought was a really robust strategy. Had a plan in place as well, and I presented it back to the business and my manager back then, and the feedback was, we've never done this at HID. When that's not how we do things. So it was obviously a bit of a setback for me to be sort of, I suppose, hit that barrier. But I stood my ground and I rationalized it. I told them the sort of why I felt it was the right approach, and they they were taking a risk in me going down that approach. As I said, they said that this wasn't how we sort of did things at HID, and it was an approach that they felt that we would work. It's something that had never been done, so why do it now? And I stood my ground and I pushed back, and I was like, just because we've never done it before, it's not to say that we shouldn't do it. And I think they pondered on that for a while. As I said before, I'd only been in the business for 8 months. I was asking for a considerable amount of investment in this piece of work that I was putting forward. And, I suppose I still needed to prove myself. But they decided to take that risk. They decided to invest in that piece of work. And I feel like that was a real moment for me within the business, being given that trust, being given the opportunity to kind of just run with something and try something new, try something that hadn't been done before, sort of really, really said volumes.
And what I like about both of your stories is that, like, you don't have, as you said, both of you are not in the same. You have a different background, you have a different experience within identity and access management. But there is one thing that characterized both of your profile here, is the tenacity and the perseverance when to achieve what you think is the right thing to achieve at that moment. Whether it is you, Natacha, with your project and being able to articulate it towards the business, or you, Elizabeth, your ability to actually, apart from doing voluntary work, is this ability to actually ask for what you want to have as a career, and prove that, and deep dive into the work, into the content. So it's I think this is a great lesson for all the people in the beginning or whatever stage they are in their career. Both of your experiences are giving this foundation. Like, if you believe in if you know where you want to go, and if you that's one of the way to achieve it. As we are moving forward in this conversation, we can take a lot of time there. I'd like to stop here a little bit on if you had a magic wand and that you were building you were building a framework for women of the next generation in identity. what would be the tradition or the things that you would start building today so they could benefit tomorrow? It could be an initiative, it could be anything. That is a tricky one, right?
It is tricky.
But maybe it's because it's not the right representation. So maybe we don't need to do that because we want to be inclusive.
We do want to be inclusive. So I think that we need to be in a place in the next generation. So there's so many changes happening in tech, right? You have to say it on every podcast, with the advancement of AI. So there we've said that phrase. There are so many changes happening in tech that are, I think, creating a challenging environment for the future of standards development. And that's where my head is at right now. That's where I initially went to, was like, how can we see more women in those environments? But I don't just want to see more women in those environments. I want to see more representation from the global south, like I mentioned earlier. And I want to see more young people in those environments. No offense to any of my colleagues in standards. The demographic probably skews older because of their experience. There are many years of experience doing the job before you get into the place where you are actually developing the standards that enable people to do the job. But as technology changes, we risk losing that pipeline of talent who are going to be solving these thorny issues of the future and setting the standards that actually underpin safety and security in that new future. So what I would love to see are programs that are very targeted at ensuring that we have the future of engineering talent, that talent is diverse and comes from all these places and from these demographics, and ensures that, we have people in the future who are capable of solving these problems. And then we're not just dependent on AI for developing all the standards in the future.
Well, yeah. That's a good one. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Natacha?
I think that's a great one. I think it is, and I actually agree. I think it is investment in those future generations coming up into those areas, and those making sure that there's the mechanisms in place, people there to support, to advocate, to mentor, to champion their growth as well. Because I think, Elizabeth, you're absolutely right. The demographic is skewed to the demographic is very skewed. So trying to have more representation across age ranges, gender, different ethnic minorities as well, or as you said, the global south, is going to be. I think it's also critical to making sure that our future is as safe and secure as it possibly can be, because we all have different viewpoints and different backgrounds. So I think it goes back to that representation just being absolutely critical.
And this is a problem that no individual company is going to solve on its own. There's no individual company incentivized to solve this problem on their own, right? They want to be able to recruit the talented engineers, and so they will do everything they can to do that. How we create those talented engineers for the future, as an industry, as a profession, that's the real challenge. And that's why I love working with those organizations like ID Pro and the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation, because they are specifically trying to think about and address that challenge.
Yeah, I think that the core of the way we operate, or we've been operating, for example, for developing products or even marketing, is going to evolve as AI. We said it is going to transform the day-to-day tasks, or the day-to-day tasks and activities. There is this notion of being augmented, and the risk that we're creating is that we give the impression that there is no room for anyone anymore because it's going to be automated. but especially in identity, and we've seen that as well in identity, is that there is always the possibility of a breach. There is always something that you haven't thought about, and even the best machine computing system in the world is fileable. I think it can be can be mistaken, or cannot can be mistaken, and that's the thing. And this is where having a next generation of a next generation of talents in security, bringing also everything that they've learned, being digital natives, and in their way of experiencing the world through this digital native lens, is important for us as well, because that will allow us to better secure the future.
Yeah. And it comes back to the point that I raised at the beginning, which is, anytime you're making decisions in these spaces, you're weighing up values. And if we're actually delegating that to technology itself, how do you assess what values are being applied to those situations, and how many layers deep is the value pyramid going? And so I think it's really important that we have people with the knowledge and the expertise to be able to drive those values-based decisions and assess, because otherwise you have unintended consequences. And we see that across identity systems. Last 2 weeks ago, I was at MOSIP Connect, and there was a story from, I believe she's the Director General of the Ugandan identity system. And, it's just your standard, the way that their biometric systems were tuned at their earliest pilot. She told this story openly. It wasn't tuned to somebody with as dark a complexion as she has, and the biometric system kept telling her to remove her face mask, for example. So these are just simple things that we already know about this, and that causes outcomes for people who are trying to access government ID systems all around the world. We've seen similar situations in the U.S. So we need to be tuning these systems in ways that lead to the outcomes that we want. And if we delegate those decisions to other pieces of technology, we're out of the equation.
Thank you. That was very insightful. As we're moving towards the end of this conversation, there is a section that I really enjoy, which is called the lightning round, that we do with every guest that we have here. And it's a series of short questions with a theme. So what's the theme for today? Woman. So I'd like to ask you very quick questions, if you can answer with all first thing that comes to your mind. That would be super fun. A woman in your career who changed how you think about identity, or a woman in your career who changed you, transformed you.
Heather Flanagan.
Natacha?
Does it have to be a woman that I know, personally?
Not necessarily.
Brene Brown.
Ooh. That's a nice one. That's a nice name drop, I have to.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah, why are you obsessed with her? Let's take a moment. Why are you obsessed with her?
Well, I think she talks about a lot of I suppose one of the themes that we have covered a little bit today around vulnerability.
Courage and vulnerability, yes.
And how actually, being vulnerable is a very courageous thing to do. It's not always about having all the answers and knowing everything, but kind of being willing to take that risk of not necessarily being kind of the smartest person in a room.
And you shared the anecdote of you actually being courageous and vulnerable at the same time when you presented your project.
So can I
go ahead.
Explain why?
Are you changing your name?
Absolutely not. No, I love Brene Brown, but I love Heather Flanagan more. Heather Flanagan, if you don't know her, is an industry expert, industry thought leader. She translates tech to human. And if you haven't read her blogs recently about the tensions between interoperability and sovereignty, you should go ahead and do that. She is wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm not
and
familiar
she,
with her, so I will
Get
yeah,
familiar.
recommend.
yeah, I'll definitely get reading.
She's wonderful. She's wonderful.
Yeah, and she created an AI agent called Heather, I think, if I read that properly on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she
So
has her own. She has her own agent because she's a very prolific writer. And if you want to know her thoughts on any subject, you can start with her Heatherbot, and it will summarize her stuff for you. So.
Is there one leadership habit that you learned from another woman, Elizabeth?
A leadership habit I've learned from another woman. I'm sure plenty. I am jumping to a woman from a bank that I used to work in called Connie Leary. And this is such a simple habit, but I don't always do it. And it was about ensuring that, like, every so often, periodically, you remind people over email what you're doing and how you add value. And I just thought that was great. I can probably come up with something different if you give me more time. Maybe cut that little bit out.
No, I like that. I like that one. So I'm gonna throw in two now. You've inspired me, Elizabeth. So the first one is around like upward management. So obviously we do have we work with a diverse range of people, and I know certainly when I changed from one manager to another manager, the way that they approach things was completely different, and actually the way you need to manage them needs to differ to support that as well. So I think that's really critical, being able to, knowing your audience essentially, whether it's your internal audience and the best way to engage and communicate with them. But the other one that I had from when I was agency side is be curious. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask as many questions so that you kind of get a real understanding of what the picture is, that you're not trying to second guess elements. So that's something that's really stuck by me, is I'm always trying to ask questions, always trying to get to the bottom of things, trying to understand the situation.
This is a great advice.
I have one more to throw in, if you don't mind.
Yes.
And it's related to that curiosity piece, and I think your network is much more powerful than you even realize, and just reaching out, asking those questions, putting things out there, you are going to find that there are so many more answers and opportunities for you. And that woman who I think best taught me that, her name was Nuala Murphy, and she leads a women's network in Northern Ireland.
That's a great feedback. One last, what's your superpower? So Elizabeth, we know that it's to prepare breakfast in 2 minutes. So that's your superpower.
I think that my superpower that has been most consistent throughout my career has probably been understanding how to zoom in and zoom out. Like, when is it most appropriate to look at the wood, and when is it most appropriate to look at the trees, and being willing to do both in equal measure in order to get the right outcome.
Natacha?
So my superpower, I'm not sure if this is, well, it could be good or bad depending on who you are and where you stand. But I think I'm quite a vocal person. So I do share my viewpoints. I try to say it as it is as much as possible. And just bring myself every day. So whether I'm doesn't matter what I'm trying to tackle, trying to, I suppose, stay true to myself as much as possible.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Natasha and Elizabeth. This was a very interesting conversation, very authentic conversation as well. And I appreciate you've been vulnerable with us. Let's take also time to thank every woman in this industry that helps keep us safe and secure. I'm just going to do some wrap up here and telling you that we are going to have in our next episode Simon Moffat joining us to unpack everything around RSA. So the best moments, the most exciting trends, and what to look at to actually focus on. And very important, Rich is back at that time. But we'll communicate with you if there is a question that you'd like to ask Simon, Natasha, or Elizabeth. We'll reach out to you so we can air it at that time. I would take this time as well to thank the audience for listening us, for supporting us in this conversation, and for being part of this identity community. And if the episode resonates with you, if you like it, as usual, follow us on LinkedIn. And all the social media platforms, and listen to our next episode. I'm very grateful for having you both today with us, sharing your stories, sharing your view, inspiring, I think, a next generation of women in identity, and that was very important. One word for the end, I think it would be tenacity, because that characterizes both of you very, very well, and I'm very, very happy to have met you today.
Thank you so much, Arielle.
We're both happy to meet you too, or I think you guys work together, but I'm happy to meet you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you
so much.
You've been listening to Authentic Talks. Ready to rethink what you know? Follow us on LinkedIn and join the conversation. Until next time, stay ahead, stay authentic.